Hey, I'm Bobby from Longtooth Llama Games. I'm developing No Gods of Men, which is a game that combines 2D roguelike action with base building and colony management, all in a hand-drawn dark fantasy world that hopefully feels like you're playing off the pages of a comic book. Now, this is my first attempt at a devlog, so hopefully you can bear with me here. As a solo developer, I really wanted to be able to share my process. I think being able to show how the sausage is made can also offer an opportunity for me to get feedback sooner rather than later. And hopefully make the sausage even better. So we'll see. And so today I wanted to walk through specifically how I approach level design. So No Gods of Men, like I said, it combines two genres, action roguelike and base building. For the action part of the game, before I even think about level design, it's really important for me to figure out what type of gameplay I wanted. Do I want fast-paced roguelike action similar to Enter the Gungeon or Risk of Rain? Or do I want slower-paced with more focus on exploration, something like Hollow Knight, for instance? Now, the former would mean a tighter level design, something that players can bounce around in, try to avoid enemies. The latter would mean a larger, more complex map with lots of nooks and crannies and discoverables, places for players to get lost in. So with No Gods of Men, my original vision was really wanting to tap into that power fantasy. I want players to have this visceral feeling of progression as they mow down waves of enemies. I want them to really be challenged to make decisions when they're upgrading their players. I want them to be able to think about their builds more strategically and ultimately test their mettle within a battlefield. And so I decided I'd focus more on a map that offers those sorts of opportunities, slaying dozens of enemies, rather than one that is more open world and more exploration based. I think a game that does this really, really well and served as a big inspiration for me as I went into this project is the first Risk of Rain. The Risk of Rain, at least the first one, does not have this vast open world for the player to explore and discover. Instead, it has a procedurally generated, finite sandbox that offers lots of, treasure chests and goodies and things that do motivate a player still to explore. But the main goal is to offer a battlefield for the player to mow down enemy after enemy and really test, all of the different weapons and upgrades that they've been leveling up with. So using that as my inspiration, that's really what's at the forefront of my mind now whenever I think about how I want to design the next level. That is the base principle of being able to offer players the opportunity to, avoid lots of enemies, to be challenged by having lots of enemies coming at them, and less about offering them opportunities to find nooks and crannies and discover little, Easter eggs and whatnot in a large, vast open world. It's really about offering a fast-paced action roguelike gameplay for the player. Okay, so now that we have the vision and the principles, we need to actually develop the level. And so it all starts with a Google spreadsheet. Each cell in the spreadsheet corresponds to a 192 square pixel box in the game. And each cell gets a special character. So if it's 0, for instance, it'll be empty. But there's also characters for ground cells, walls, temporary floating platforms, other platforming elements. Now, once I have a solid draft of that spreadsheet, I do two things. One, I download it as a CSV, obviously, but we'll come back to what I do with that CSV a little bit later. And two, I zoom out and take a super ugly screenshot of the sheet at large. And yeah, I know it's not super high tech, but basically I take that screenshot and I copy and paste it into Photoshop, where I'll be doing all of the drawing and artwork. Now, you're probably wondering, I wonder why Bobby doesn't just implement a tiling system for his maps. And that's a totally reasonable question that I second guess my answer to every day. But the reason is because I want each map to really be handcrafted and feel like it was drawn. I want the players to feel like they're running through the pages of a comic book. And it's really difficult to accomplish that level of handcraftedness with a tiled background and map. So I basically built a hybrid. The artwork that's rendered to the screen is completely handcrafted. But the elements in code that like objects that collide with players and so on and so forth are actually generated at runtime with a sort of tiling system. And so what you're seeing here is me drawing what will be rendered to the screen. But now let's jump over to what I'll be doing with the CSV that I downloaded a little bit earlier. So I'm developing No Gods of Men in GameMaker Studio using GML script. I love GameMaker Studio. I've been using it for a couple other games in the past as well. I love the IDE. It's really easy for me to code in. And so what I do is I'll take that CSV file and I'll add it to included files. Now, I may have another devlog later on that goes a little bit more in depth into my overall system architecture and data model for the game. But for right now, at a high level, suffice it to say, for today's devlog, each game room has a constructor. So I implemented this constructor for each room such that it initializes all game state and objects. So that includes things like backgrounds and maps, but it also includes things like the state of the player, the state of enemies, spawning configurations, things like that. So within my constructor, I call a script that I appropriately named side scroller generate world. This script is pretty simple. It reads the CSV file, checks the character in each cell of the sheet, and instantiates the appropriate object on the map. Again, this does not render any images to the screen. It's merely creating invisible objects for the player and enemies to interact with in the background. Once this script completes, back in the constructor, I then render the images I just drew on top of those objects that were instantiated by the CSV script. So, if I drew the artwork accurately and the CSV file has aligned coordinates correctly, the player should have no idea that the background and the overall level are these two independent systems. And so, voila, welcome to the Blighted Realm. This is the first roguelike level the player will encounter in No Gods of Men. So the player initially first enters this mysterious ruin, followed by a few soon-to-be disciples. But you need resources, like wood and stone, to actually begin rebuilding this ruin. So you must enter the realm of an old god to scavenge whatever you can find. But this realm is overgrown, it's plagued, it's blighted. Those who followed this realm's god into the abyss have become monstrosities, unrecognizable from their former selves. Now, this is only one of several realms the player will delve into. The realms all have their own themes and will have handcrafted maps just like this one. And development has been going really well overall for No Gods of Men. That's it for this first devlog. This will hopefully be the first of many. I actually think it's really important for me to continue to publish these just to hold myself accountable to timelines. But also I think as a solo developer, it's really valuable to externalize a lot of those things that are going on in my head. I think it's super easy to get isolated during development and almost get lost in your own thoughts, and being able to communicate those to the outside world is super helpful. And then obviously being able to communicate those and get feedback is even more helpful. So like I said, I think this is going to be the first of many devlogs. I'll be experimenting with different formats as well. But in the meantime, you can follow along. You can wishlist No Gods of Men on Steam. I have the devlog blog that's on the website, nogodsofmen.com. And you can also follow this YouTube channel. And until next time, I'm excited to continue development.